destroyed your brother's dream," my mother said, her eyes filled with a fury I'd never seen before. The irony was, until that moment, I was the only person who had truly believed in that dream. My name is Chloe. I'm 34, and I'm a marketing director at a major advertising firm in Portland, Oregon. My younger brother, Ethan, is the family's artistic soul. While I was building a career on spreadsheets and strategy, he was discovering the world through the art of craft brewing. If you're out there, on the other side of this screen, dealing with family dynamics that feel more like a minefield, hit that like button and subscribe, because my story might just be the strength you need to turn the tables. Growing up with Ethan meant being his protector and his biggest fan. In school, I was the practical one. He was the dreamer. My mother, Helen, made sure to highlight that difference every chance she got. To her, Ethan's natural talent for creating unique beer flavors was a divine gift, while my professional success was the result of a cold, almost ruthless ambition. My father, Richard, was a peripheral figure, a man who learned early on that silence was the price of peace in our home, especially when my mother's comments crossed a line. This dynamic solidified in our adult lives. By default, I became the family's financial and practical anchor. So when Ethan decided he wanted to turn his passion into a business, a craft brewery and taproom, I was the first one to champion the idea. He had the product knowledge, the palate, the soul of the business, but he had no capital and no idea how to build a brand. "Chloe, I want to create Hearthstone Brewery, a place that changes how people experience beer in this city," he told me, his eyes shining. And seeing that shine, I didn't hesitate. "I'll help you," I promised. And I did. I pulled $25,000 from my personal savings for the initial investment, the lease on a spot in the Pearl District, and the first round of brewing equipment. More than that, I invested my most valuable asset, my time and my expertise. I spent countless nights developing the entire brand concept, the logo, the visual identity, and the launch strategy. To me, it wasn't work. It was the joy of seeing my brother's dream take shape, a dream that was now, in part, my own. I just never imagined my own mother was about to turn that dream into the most bitter drink of all. The first few months were exactly as I dreamed. Ethan and I were an unbeatable team. He handled the brewing science and flavor profiles, while I negotiated with suppliers, developed the taproom menu, and built the digital marketing plan. My downtown apartment became the unofficial headquarters for Hearthstone Brewery, with packaging samples and social media mock-ups spread across my living room floor. The first sign of the coming storm arrived during a surprise visit from my mother to the space we were renovating. She wasn't alone. "Chloe, sweetie, this is Madison. She's the daughter of my friend Carol. She's a wonderful interior designer, and she's going to help us make this place feel a bit more authentic." Ethan looked surprised, but smiled. "Mom, that's great, but Chloe and I were already working on the design elements." "Oh, but branding is one thing. Atmosphere is another, honey," she interrupted, patting his arm and shooting me a look that was a mix of pity and triumph. "Chloe understands logos and analytics. Madison understands soul, textures, and she's giving us a friends and family rate." That was the first of many decisions made behind my back. Within weeks, my mother had evolved from an occasional observer to the project's self-appointed creative director. Concepts I had researched and validated with Ethan were dismissed as too corporate or lacking warmth. "It's okay," Ethan assured me over the phone when I voiced my concern. "Mom is just so excited, and Madison does have some good ideas. Besides, she convinced Dad to put in some more money to get the custom bar built faster." I bit my tongue and stepped back, focusing on the marketing aspects I still controlled. But the feeling of being an outsider in my own project was growing. That feeling intensified when Madison started appearing in photos on my family group chat. Madison and my mother at a flea market picking out vintage decor. Madison and Ethan at a meeting with a local artist to design the tap handles. A meeting I wasn't even told about. In one photo, Madison was posing proudly next to the newly installed wooden bar, a centerpiece I had no part in choosing. "Ethan seems to be getting close with Madison," I mentioned to my boyfriend, Mark, one evening, showing him the picture on my phone. "Babe, maybe it's just because she has more free time right now," he suggested, always the voice of reason. "You've been slammed with that new campaign at work." I nodded, trying to push down the gnawing feeling that something more was happening. After all, Ethan and I had been each other's constants for our entire lives. A few months of renovation couldn't change that. Could it? As the grand opening date approached, the silence from their end became deafening. The invitations to final walkthroughs and vendor meetings simply stopped coming. When I called Ethan to check in, his answers were clipped, almost evasive. "Mom's handling it," or "It's already taken care of." Our lively discussions about customer experience and loyalty programs were replaced by an unsettling quiet. All the while, I was still the silent support system. I finalized the brewery's website, paid out of my own pocket for a professional photo shoot of the beers, and, as the grand opening surprise, I had secured a feature on one of Portland's most influential beer blocks. It was a guaranteed way to put Hearthstone Brewery on the map. I kept the confirmation email, imagining Ethan's face when I showed him. I told myself everything would go back to normal after the launch. This was just pre-opening stress. The punch to the gut came from the most mundane of places, an Instagram story. It was on Madison's profile, a short video clip with the caption, "Countdown is on, friends and investors, soft open." In the video, Ethan, my parents, and a group of strangers were toasting with glasses of beer inside the finished tap room. The timestamp indicated it was happening right now. My blood ran cold. I, the sister, the investor, the brand creator, hadn't been invited to the soft opening. I couldn't breathe. I called Ethan that night, my voice carefully controlled. "Saw you had an event tonight? Looked fun." A pause on the other end. Yeah, it was a last-minute thing. Madison put it together just to test the taps. Mom thought it was best not to call you so you wouldn't feel pressured, so it wouldn't feel like work." "With Madison?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "She was here, helping out." "Chloe, don't make a big deal out of this. The grand opening is next week. You'll be the guest of honor." But I was never honored. The official invitation arrived via mass email, a generic graphic designed by Madison with no mention of my name or role. Still, I carried on. I paid the final invoice for the graphic designer who formatted the menus I wrote. I paid the first installment for the point-of-sale system I had researched and recommended. My total investment, including the initial capital and these operational costs, was now over $40,000. I clung to the hope that on opening day, my contribution would be acknowledged. The final confirmation that I was being systematically erased came during a family dinner, 2 weeks before the opening. I'd stepped away to take a call, and on my way back, I heard voices from the kitchen. Chloe has always been controlling. It was my mother's voice, crystal clear. Ethan is finally getting to shine on his own without her shadow. She wants to turn his dream into another one of her corporate projects. It must be hard for Ethan. He's such a pure artist, he doesn't need that kind of aggressive executive energy around. Exactly, which is why we've had to minimize her involvement for Ethan's sake. I stood frozen in the hallway. My own mother was actively sabotaging me, painting me as a villain to justify my exclusion. That night, I broke down to Mark. What if they don't want me in the business at all? What if this is all leading to them cutting me out completely? "They can't do that," he said, holding me. "You're his sister. You invested everything."
But what if Mom has convinced him otherwise? You don't know how she can twist things. Then you need to talk to him, face to face, Mark said firmly. No more guessing. He was right. It was time for a confrontation. I texted Ethan the next morning. We need to talk about the brewery and about us. Urgently. His reply took hours and was cold. Come by the taproom Thursday night. We can talk then.
The days leading up to it were torture. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would present my case without sounding like the aggressive executive my mother had painted me as. I wanted to believe Ethan was just caught in the middle, that one honest conversation would fix everything. I walked into Hearthstone Brewery that Thursday with a heavy but hopeful heart. I had no idea I was walking into an ambush. The smell of fresh hops and new wood filled the air. Madison's design work was flawless, I had to admit. But the scene at the main table was chilling. My father, Richard, was slumped in an armchair, staring at the floor. Ethan sat rigidly in the middle, not meeting my eyes. My mother, Helen, stood beside him, a hand on his shoulder like a queen guarding her prince. And in the seat that should have been mine, next to Ethan, sat Madison, wearing an expression of feigned concern and poorly hidden triumph. "What is this?" I asked, remaining on my feet. "Ethan, I thought we were going to talk alone." "That's why we're all here, Chloe," my mother interjected before my brother could speak. "We need to clear the air about your role in the brewery." A cold dread washed over me. A heavy silence, the kind that precedes a disaster, filled the room. "We've had a lot of discussions," my mother continued, her tone patronizing. "And as the partners in this venture, we've all agreed that your involvement has become problematic." "Problematic?" I echoed, looking directly at Ethan, who finally looked up, his expression blank and rehearsed. "Your controlling behavior, your need to turn this into one of your marketing campaigns, the way you've tried to overshadow Ethan's talent with your spreadsheets and analytics, the way you hold your financial contribution over everyone's head." I felt the floor drop out from under me. This was a script, and everyone but me had rehearsed it. "Ethan," I pushed, my voice a whisper. "Is that what you think?" Before he could answer, my mother stepped forward, physically placing herself between us. "What Ethan thinks is that his brewery deserves a chance to have his soul in it, and frankly, your presence makes that impossible." Her words echoed in the empty tap room. "My presence in the project, you mean?" A smile of pure satisfaction bloomed on my mother's face. The final blow she had been orchestrating for months. "We've discussed it, and we've decided it's best for Hearthstone Brewery if you are no longer part of the company. Not as a marketing head, not as a partner, not as anything. It's better for everyone this way." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the low hum of the beer cooler. My father didn't move. Madison had the decency to look away. And Ethan, my brother, my protege, whose dream I helped build with my own 2 hands and my own money, sat in complicit silence. He was ending not just a business partnership, but a lifetime of brotherhood. "I see," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "When was this decision made?" "We've been moving in this direction for a while," my mother replied, clearly pleased with my calm reaction, mistaking my shock for acceptance. "Ethan asked Madison to be his public relations and events manager weeks ago. We just needed to make your exit official." I turned to Madison, who met my gaze with a challenging look. "Congratulations," I said, flatly. "It's nothing personal," she replied, the lie so transparent it was almost funny. "Ethan," I tried one last time, "is this really what you want?" My mother answered for him again. "Ethan wants a successful business, free of your drama. You've always been the difficult one." Difficult? The first crack appeared in my composure. "I invested over $40,000 in this. I created the brand from scratch." "There it is," she pointed accusingly, "throwing your money in our faces, using your investment to control everything. This is exactly why you can't be here." I looked at my father, a silent plea for him to say anything.
He met my eyes for a brief moment, then looked away, his lifelong habit of conflict avoidance winning out yet again. And in that instant, a sharp clarity cut through the pain. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a purge, a planned execution.
"Good to know," I said simply. I turned and walked toward the door. I heard Ethan say my name once, softly, almost inaudibly, but no one followed. No one tried to stop me. I drove home in a daze. The city lights of Portland blurred into a watercolor smear as the tears I'd held back finally fell. When I got to my apartment, Mark was waiting, and the whole story poured out of me in a broken torrent of pain and disbelief. His arms around me were the only thing holding me together. But the grief of that night didn't paralyze me. Instead, it sharpened into a cold, clear resolve I didn't know I possessed. I stayed up all night, not crying, but acting. I sat down at my dining table, the same one where I'd sketched the first drafts of the Hearthstone logo, and I began my own operation. First, the money. The initial $25,000 investment was a direct transfer, a gift that would be difficult to reclaim legally. But the other $15,000? That had all been put on my business credit card, with Ethan's promise that it would be reimbursed from the brewery's first profits. Payments to the web developer, the photographer, the point-of-sale system provider. I opened my banking app, and with steady fingers, I disputed every single one of those charges as services contracted for a third party without a formal agreement. It was a gray area, but I had the email chains to prove the beneficiary company was not mine. Next, the brand. The name Hearthstone Brewery, the logo, the entire visual identity, I had created them. And in my professional capacity, I had done what Ethan, in his artistic purity, would never have thought of to do. I had filed to trademark the brand and logo with the USPTO under my own consulting LLC months ago. It was standard procedure to protect an asset I was developing with the full intention of transferring it to the business once it was formally incorporated. But it never was. I opened my laptop. With the same calm I felt disputing the charges, I drafted a formal cease and desist letter. It was simple and direct, asserting my LLC's ownership of the Hearthstone Brewery trademark and all associated visual assets. The letter legally prohibited any use of the brand on physical or digital materials, including the taproom's main sign, menus, merchandise, and social media accounts, under penalty of legal action for intellectual property infringement. Finally, the grand finale. The beer blogger feature. The $2,000 feature I had negotiated and paid the first $500 deposit for. I called his agent at 8 a.m. sharp. "There's been a change of plans," I explained. "The campaign has been canceled due to a breach of agreement from the contracting party. Please pull the feature for the grand opening." By 9 a.m., as the morning sun streamed through my window, the work was done. I hadn't destroyed my brother's dream. I had simply removed all of my pillars that were holding it up. I turned off my phone and went for a long walk along the waterfront, feeling a silence that was both terrifying and liberating. The war had begun. I spent the rest of the day in a self-imposed cocoon, disconnected from the world. Around noon, I met my best friend from college, Olivia, for a lunch I didn't intend to turn into a therapy session. But one look at my face was all it took. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said before we even opened our menus. When I finished the story, her outrage was a welcome balm. "They kicked you out of your own project? Your mother said that to your face, and Ethan just let it?" I nodded, pushing food around my plate. He said nothing, which is the same as saying everything. Olivia put down her fork and looked at me, her expression serious. "Chloe, there's something you need to know. I didn't say anything before because I didn't want to cause trouble, but now you need to hear this." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Your mom has been talking about you, to everyone, for months." Olivia looked uncomfortable. "At my parents' anniversary party, she told my mom how competitive and aggressive you'd become since your promotion. She said you were trying to buy the family's affection, and that Ethan felt smothered by you." I stared at her, stunned. "What? Why would she say that?" I don't know. But she was planting these seeds, little comments, concerned looks, creating this narrative that you were the unstable villain and he was the sensitive victim. I tried to shut it down, but I'm not everywhere. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Your controlling behavior. She wasn't just turning Ethan against me. She was building a public case against me. But why? I whispered. Control, Olivia said simply. You're independent, successful, you don't need her. Ethan, on the other hand, is still dependent. She needs to be the one he relies on, and you threaten that. The pieces started clicking into place, forming a mosaic of 1,000 tiny cruelties I had long ignored as the daughter who only wanted to believe the best of her mother. I went home with my head spinning. When I finally turned my phone back on, the flood of notifications almost made it crash. 32 missed calls, dozens of texts. Most were from my mother, cycling from righteous fury, how dare you do this to your brother, to threats, I will tell everyone what a monster you are, and finally to a pathetic attempt at manipulation. We can fix this if you just apologize. There were also texts from my father, more subdued. Your mother is very upset. Please call me. But it was a voicemail left at 4 a.m. that changed everything. It was from Ethan. His voice was choked with sobs. Chloe, I'm so sorry. Mom, she lied to me about everything. The lawyer just called about the trademark notice. I didn't know. She showed me a fake document, Chloe. Said the trademark was already in the company's name. Please call me. I need my sister. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the call button. The pain in his voice felt real, but I didn't know what to believe anymore. As I hesitated, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered cautiously. Chloe, it's Dave, the head brewer Ethan hired? Dave, is everything okay? Look, I know this is none of your business, but I have to tell you. I heard the whole argument that day. After you left, your brother and your mom had a massive fight. Ethan defended you, said it wasn't right, and your mother threatened him. She said if he didn't cut you out, she'd get your dad to pull all his investment and she'd personally make sure the brewery went bankrupt. His voice was low and rushed. And there's more. That Madison woman, she's not just a designer, she's Ethan's ex-girlfriend. Your mom brought her back into his life. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Madison wasn't a professional hire. She was a pawn in my mother's game to isolate Ethan. Chloe, Ethan's being manipulated. He's terrified. He loves you, but your mom has him trapped. I barely had time to process this when my apartment buzzer rang. It was the front desk. Ms. Hayes, your mother is down here in the lobby, and she's causing a scene. Don't let her up, I told the concierge, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Please tell her I'm not available, and if she insists, you have my permission to call building security. I hung up and walked to my window, peering through the blinds. There she was, gesturing wildly at the lobby camera, her face flush with anger. My mother, the woman who cared so much about appearances, was making a scene in the lobby of my upscale condo building? This was worse than I thought. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts amidst the chaos. The revelation about Madison being an ex-girlfriend, the confirmation that Ethan was being blackmailed, it all painted a picture of pathological manipulation. And now my mother was bringing the war to my doorstep. The next attack came from the one place I thought was safe. My work phone rang. It was Sarah, our front desk coordinator. Chloe, I am so sorry to bother you. I know you took a personal day, but there's a situation here. Your mother showed up about 20 minutes ago. She's demanding to see you. My blood ran cold. What? What is she doing there? When I told her she wasn't in, she lost it. She's in the lobby yelling at anyone who will listen, saying you stole your brother's money, that you're having some kind of mental breakdown and sabotaging the family business. She hesitated. Mr. Davies, our CEO, is trying to calm her down, but she's completely erratic. My professional and personal worlds were colliding in the most humiliating way possible. My mother had never set foot in my office. She barely knew what I did, other than that I made good money. Now she was there, at the heart of my career, trying to burn down the reputation I'd spent a decade building. "I'm on my way," I said, grabbing my keys. The 20-minute drive to the office felt like an eternity. I wasn't going there to defend myself. I was going to contain a wildfire. When I arrived, the scene was even worse than I had imagined. 2 security guards were escorting my mother out of the glass lobby as she shouted, "You don't know what she's capable of. She's always been unstable. Ask her brother." The embarrassment was a physical heat on my face. My colleagues from various departments were watching the spectacle unfold. Mr. Davies, a man who had always been my mentor, approached with a look of pure concern. "Chloe, for God's sake, take whatever time you need to handle this personal matter. Your work here speaks for itself. No one is listening to these baseless accusations." His support should have been a comfort, but the public display left me feeling exposed and violated. This wasn't about a brewery anymore. My mother was on a scorched earth campaign to destroy every pillar of my life, my family, my reputation, my career. As the guards guided her to the parking garage, her eyes locked with mine across the lobby. I expected to see remorse, shame, anything. But all I saw was cold fury and worse. A flicker of satisfaction at having successfully disrupted my carefully ordered world. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt child seeking her mother's approval vanished. In her place stood a clear-eyed adult who finally saw the pattern of abuse for what it was. This wasn't love. It wasn't family. It was toxic control, and it had gone on long enough. I returned to my apartment with a new resolve. It was time to end this, not with emotional reactions, but with calm, irrefutable truth. It was time for a final confrontation. 2 days later, I sat at a corner table in a quiet coffee shop in Nob Hill, a neutral territory. I'd arrived early to settle my nerves, arranging documents in a folder beside me. The official USPTO trademark filing, copies of the cease and desist letter, my credit card statements with the disputed charges highlighted, and screenshots of my conversations with vendors. Ethan arrived alone, as I'd requested. He looked like he'd aged a decade in a few days. The dark circles under his eyes were stark against his pale skin. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hoarse as he slid into the chair opposite me. "What happened, Ethan?" I asked, getting straight to the point. "He believed her," he began, his voice breaking. "Mom, she kept showing me things. Texts you supposedly sent her complaining about my artistic whims, saying the brewery was a bad investment you were starting to regret. She said you were embarrassed to attach your professional name to a small-time project." Silent tears streamed down his face. I believed her because it was easier than believing our own mother would lie like that, so deliberately. She showed me a fake USPTO document with the logo registered to a company she claimed she had already set up for us. She said you were trying to seize control so you could sell the brand later. "She faked text messages?" I asked, still struggling to comprehend the depth of the deception. Ethan nodded, pulling out his phone. He showed me a conversation. The messages were attributed to me, but the language and tone were all wrong. Sharp, dismissive, resentful. And Madison? Mom convinced me to give her a second chance. She said I needed someone who truly believed in me, not a partner who only saw numbers. She isolated me from you, filled my head with lies. And the day of the meeting, did you know what was going to happen? Not like that, he said, his voice thick with shame. She told me it was a meeting to realign expectations, that you were unhappy and wanted out, and we needed to make it official. I never imagined she would humiliate you like that. By the time I realized what was happening, I froze.
And after you left, I confronted her.
His hand trembled on the table. She admitted to everything, Chloe, with no remorse, said she did it to protect me from your influence. When I told her I wanted you back, she threatened me. She said she'd make Dad pull his investment and that she'd tell everyone I was an ungrateful failure.
The things she's been saying about me, I murmured. I pushed my folder across the table. I brought my own truth. As Ethan reviewed the documents, his expression shifted from shock to horror and finally to a cold anger. The contrast between my documented reality and our mother's fiction was stark. I've arranged a meeting, I said finally, with Dad and our Aunt Carol and Uncle David. They need to hear the truth from both of us. When? He asked without hesitation. Tomorrow night, at Aunt Carol's house. I'll be there, he said, with a resolve I hadn't seen in months. This ends now. The meeting the next evening was tense. We gathered in my aunt's living room. Me, Ethan, our father, and my mother's two more level-headed siblings. We presented the evidence calmly and methodically. The fake texts, the forged legal document, the bank statements. Ethan told them about the blackmail. Dave, the head brewer, had provided a written statement confirming what he'd overheard. My aunt, shocked, revealed that my mother had asked her to help reconnect Madison and Ethan, never mentioning their romantic history. My father was silent through most of it, his face growing grayer with each new piece of evidence. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. I knew some of it, he admitted, looking at me with profound regret. Not the extent of it, but I knew she was pushing you away. I did nothing. I chose silence to keep the peace, and in doing so, I allowed this war. I'm so sorry, Chloe. My mother arrived last, having been told it was an emergency family meeting about the brewery. Her confident entrance faltered as she saw the assembled group and the evidence spread across the coffee table. What is the meaning of this? She demanded. It means the truth, Mum. What followed was a painful, predictable performance. Denial, accusations of a conspiracy against her, attempts at manipulation, when those failed, a cold, cutting rage, then hot, uncontrolled fury, and finally, when cornered by irrefutable proof, tears and claims of being misunderstood, of only wanting what was best for her family. After everything I've done for this family, she started. About the brewery? Ethan interrupted, standing up. Chloe is, and always has been, my partner. The brand is hers. The concept is ours. Madison is out. And if you cannot accept that and treat her with respect, then your role in my business and in my life will be severely limited. You would choose her over your own mother? She gasped, incredulous. I'm choosing truth over lies. I'm choosing health over toxicity. Your father will never allow this. She turned to him, expecting her lifelong enabler to fall in line. But for the first time in their marriage, my father didn't fold. Helen, that's enough. Look at what you've done. Look at the evidence. This stops now. The intervention didn't end with a group hug. My mother left in a fury, promising we'd all regret this. But something fundamental had shifted. The web of lies had been torn apart, the pattern was exposed, and for the first time, I felt like we were all finally walking in the same direction. The week after the intervention brought a strange new calm, like the air after a devastating storm. My mother tried various tactics: icy silence, tearful voicemails playing the victim, even calling Mark to warn him about my instability. But the spell was broken. No one was buying her act anymore. My father, surprising everyone, stood firm, supporting Ethan's decision and starting difficult conversations with my mother about the future of their marriage. I spent 35 years avoiding conflict, he told me on the phone, his voice clearer than I'd ever heard him. I realize now that in doing so, I was avoiding protecting my own children. That's not going to happen anymore. His late-in-life transformation was a balm on wounds I didn't even know were still so raw. Ethan and I began rebuilding our partnership, brick by brick. We spent hours talking, not just about the brewery, but about our whole lives, about the dynamics that had led us to this point.
I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't trademarked the brand, he said one day as we sampled a new IPA. Let's not think about that, I replied, smiling. We're here now. We drew up a new agreement. I transferred the trademark to the newly formed company, LLC. In return, my 40% stake in the business was formalized, a fair reflection of my financial and intellectual investment. Hearthstone Brewery opened a month later. My mother did not attend, refusing to come under our conditions. But the opening was a massive success, fueled by the digital campaign I orchestrated and my brother's undeniable talent. My own healing journey was the deepest reward of this ordeal. Through therapy, I began to unpack the patterns that made me vulnerable to manipulation. I learned to say no without guilt. I learned that my worth wasn't tied to what I could do or provide for others. This new strength carried over into every part of my life. At work, I became an even more confident leader. And with Mark, my rock, our relationship deepened. 6 months after the brewery opened, during a weekend trip to the Oregon coast, he proposed. Yes, I said, my heart overflowing, but on one condition. He raised an eyebrow. What's that? Our wedding, our engagement, our rules. Planning committee of 2. You and me. His laughter echoed over the sound of the waves. Deal. Life moved on. My mother, after months of isolation, reluctantly started seeing a therapist at my father's insistence. Her progress is slow, with good days and bad, but it's a start. My father rediscovered hobbies and friendships he'd let go of long ago. Ethan and I became not just siblings, but respected business partners, and Hearthstone is about to open its 2nd location. I learned the most valuable lesson of all, that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, and that boundaries aren't walls to keep love out, but the foundations that make it healthy, and that standing up for your own worth isn't selfish. It's essential. The journey from that terrible night when I was cast out of the dream I helped build to where I am today wasn't easy. It took courage to face painful truths and the strength to demand the respect I deserved. If you're facing similar family challenges or painful exclusions, remember this. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that lead to the most profound healing. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. And sometimes, when a door is slammed in your face, it's the universe forcing you to build a better one for yourself. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had to stand up to manipulation in your family or friend group? How did you find the strength to value yourself? Drop a comment below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Your support means the world as we navigate these complicated human experiences together. Thanks for listening. And remember, your story matters too.